The alarm tore through the base at 4 in the morning, and Daniel was already running before his mind caught up with his legs. Outside, the wind had turned into something alive, something that screamed through the metal frames of the alien shelters, like it wanted to pull them apart piece by piece. He had 30 seconds to reach the command tent before the storm swallowed the last working generator, and he was not going to lose this one too. 6 months earlier, the Verikai had landed in the middle of a wheat field in Alberta, calm as tourists, and told humanity that its planet was an easy place to live. Their commander, a tall, silver-skinned officer named Corin Vass, had walked across the frost with open amusement on his face, as if the mild autumn breeze itself was a joke. He said Earth had never known real hardship. He said humans built walls and heaters and called it survival, when real survival meant enduring a world that tried to kill you every single day. Laura Bennett, the base commander, had not argued. She had simply smiled and said that if the Verikai were so certain, they should prove it. She proposed a trial. 100 of their soldiers against 100 human soldiers, stationed through the darkest months of a northern winter, with only the same basic supplies. No advanced alien technology beyond what the humans were given. No human comforts beyond what the aliens carried. Whoever endured until spring would settle the argument for good. Corin Vass had laughed, a strange clicking sound that echoed off the frozen ground, and accepted immediately. He believed his people, bred in the crushing gravity and shifting heat of their homeworld, could outlast anything a gentle planet like Earth could throw at them. He did not yet understand that Earth was not gentle at all. It had simply taught its children to survive quietly, without complaint, generation after generation, until endurance became instinct instead of struggle. Now, in the 4th month of the trial, the storm outside was not gentle either. Daniel reached the command tent just as the wind ripped a support cable loose, and Grace Turner grabbed his arm and pulled him inside before the flap could slam shut on his fingers. Her face was pale, lit only by the dim emergency light clipped to her collar. 2 of the Verikai soldiers are down, she said. Their suits failed near Ridge Point 3. If we do not reach them in the next 20 minutes, the cold will finish what the storm started. Daniel did not hesitate. He grabbed the rescue pack from the corner, the one they had packed and repacked a dozen times since November, filled with thermal blankets, rope, and a compass that did not depend on any battery. Behind him, Oliver Hastings and Ellen Parks were already pulling on their outer layers, faces set with the same grim focus that had carried them through every crisis since the trial began. They stepped out into a world that had lost all shape. The snow did not fall. It attacked, driven sideways by wind that could knock a grown man off his feet if he was not careful. Visibility dropped to almost nothing beyond a few meters. Daniel led the way, counting his steps, following the line of stakes they had hammered into the frozen ground weeks earlier, exactly for nights like this. Ridge Point 3 was a jagged outcrop half a kilometer from the base, close enough to reach on foot, far enough to become a death sentence if anyone lost the trail. Daniel felt the wind trying to push him sideways with every step, felt the cold biting through even his layered gloves, but he kept moving, because stopping was worse. Somewhere ahead, 2 people were dying in the dark, and it did not matter to him that they were not human. They were people who needed help, and help was something Earth had always known how to give, even to those who mocked it. They found the first Verikai soldier collapsed against a boulder, his suit lights flickering weak and orange, his breathing shallow and labored. Grace was at his side instantly, cracking a heat pack and pressing it against his chest, while Oliver checked the readout on the failing suit. The Verikai body, so powerful under normal conditions, could not handle the sudden swing between the freezing wind and the trapped heat inside a malfunctioning suit. Their biology was built for extremes that stayed the same, not extremes that changed from one hour to the next. Ellen found the second soldier 20 meters further, half buried already, and it took all 4 of them working together to pull him free and wrap him before the cold could claim what little strength he had left. Daniel checked his own compass, confirmed the direction back to base, and gave the order to move immediately. There was no time to rest, no time to celebrate finding them alive, because alive now did not mean alive in 20 more minutes if they stayed exposed. The walk back felt longer than the walk out, every step measured against the fading light of failing suit lamps, and the growing exhaustion in his own arms, as he helped carry the weight of a body that was not built for this kind of endurance. Grace kept talking to the soldiers the whole way, her voice calm and steady, telling them to keep their eyes open, to keep breathing, to hold on just a little longer. It was a trick Daniel had learned from his grandmother, who used to say that a voice in the dark could keep a person alive as surely as any blanket. When the lights of the base finally appeared through the white chaos of the storm, Daniel felt something in his chest loosen for the first time in 20 minutes. They stumbled through the entrance, and the medical team took over immediately, stripping away failed equipment and replacing it with proper warmth, checking vital signs with quick, practiced hands. Corin Vass was waiting near the medical bay, his usual composure cracked wide open. He watched his two soldiers being treated by human hands, watched Daniel and Grace, and Oliver and Ellen standing there, exhausted but steady, covered in ice and sweat, and something that looked almost like pride, though none of them would have called it that. "You went out into that," he said, his voice quieter than Daniel had ever heard it. "You could have waited for the storm to pass. You could have lost your own lives trying to save soldiers from another world who mocked your planet only months ago." Daniel wiped frost from his eyebrows and looked at the alien commander for a long moment before answering. "Waiting was not an option," he said. "On this planet, when someone is in trouble, you go. That is not bravery. That is just what people do here." Corin Vass said nothing for a long time. Around them, the storm continued to howl against the walls, but inside the base, the warmth held steady, the way it had held steady through every one of the last 4 months, through frozen mornings and endless dark afternoons, through moments when even the humans wondered if they had taken on more than they could carry. Over the following weeks, the trial continued, but something had shifted in the way the Verikai looked at their human counterparts. They watched Ellen teach a group of alien soldiers how to build a shelter from packed snow that trapped heat better than their advanced suits ever could. They watched Oliver share extra rations without being asked, simply because someone looked hungrier than the rest. They watched Grace stay awake through an entire night shift, so an exhausted Verikai soldier could finally sleep, trusting a stranger from another world to guard him while he was at his most vulnerable. By the time the last snow began to melt and the pale sun climbed higher in the sky each day, the numbers told a story that Corin Vass could no longer laugh away. 94 of the human soldiers remained standing, tired, but whole. Only 61 of his own had survived the winter, and every one of them owed at least part of that survival to the humans who had refused to let them fall. On the final morning of the trial, Corin Vass stood before Laura Bennett outside the base, the frozen ground beneath them finally beginning to soften with the first true warmth of spring. He did not offer excuses. He simply admitted what the winter had taught him, that a species which built comfort around itself had not forgotten how to endure hardship. It had simply learned how to endure it so well that the struggle became invisible from the outside. "We saw your gentle world and believed it made you weak," he said. "We did not understand that gentleness built by strength is not weakness at all. It is mastery." Laura did not smile with triumph, because there was no triumph in watching lives nearly lost to prove a point. She simply nodded and told him that Earth had never needed to prove anything to anyone, but she was glad the trial had taught his people something worth carrying home. As the Verikai transport rose into the clearing sky that afternoon, Daniel stood beside Grace and Oliver and Ellen, watching the ship shrink into the distance until it disappeared completely. None of them spoke about medals or victory, because none of them felt like winners in the way the word usually meant. They felt like people who had done what needed doing, the same way their parents had, the same way generations before them had, quietly, without complaint, through storms that tried every single time to prove that this world was too soft to survive. Daniel breathed in the cold morning air, felt the last bite of winter fading beneath the returning sun, and understood something that no alien commander would ever fully grasp. Earth had never been soft. It had simply raised children who learned, without ever being told, that comfort and courage could live in the very same heart, and that when the storm came, as it always eventually would, someone would always choose to walk out into it, rather than let another living thing be lost to the dark.